Hello everybody, and welcome back to the building of the Cirrus Moth, a design by David Boddington. As you can see, the purpose of today's video is to look at the installation of this engine into the model, because I've now completed, I would say, about 90% of the build. The main structures have been made, and now it's time to get the hardware in and to think about where I'm going to go with this in terms of its final covering and so on. Let's take a look at what I actually did yesterday. So yesterday I've managed to install the ailerons. The hinges aren't glued in yet, they're simply in the right location and the ailerons have been lined up. The tips have been sanded 90% of the way to where they need to be. And on the upper wing, just tilt up a little, on the upper wing the shape of the inner portion looks rather nice and the tips have been done. The tank, the fuel tank here, when I've looked at photographs of prototypes, this fuel tank area, the raised bump in the centre there, is nowhere near high enough. So can I live with it? Well, of course not. So I'm going to have to change that, and then I'll do a little video just on that. I'm going to alter this so that it looks more like the prototype. On the SE5 build, I spent quite a bit of time getting the fuel tank on the upper wing of the SE5 looking right, and because it's a focal point when you look down on the model, it pays dividends. The effort you put into this little area with pipe work and so on, and the ribbing on the, in this case on the tank itself, will make an enormous difference, and it'll fool you into thinking that you're looking at a true scale model rather than a standoff scale or semi-scale model. So I'm going to readdress this. I'm not happy with it. But back to the engine. So the task today is to install the engine first of all, get it under its, I think this is called Paxilon, or some sort of fibre board. Get the cutout made in this, get the engine in place, and then the job is to make the necessary cutout on the cowl without hacking it to pieces and making multiple mistakes on it. Took me long enough to get this right. I'm happy with it now. I'm happy with the way it looks. I don't want to make a mess of it, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to approach that. So the first stage, let's have a look at the engine itself. Here we have her. It's a OS Surpass 48. I have another one of these engines in a vintage model, and it runs superbly. And I've got no doubt that this will provide all the motivation that the Moth needs to get into the air. More than it needs, to be quite honest with you. I've installed the small exhaust system, the small manifold here, and I'll explain why in a moment. So what I have to do on this design is mount this onto this plate, which will obviously involve a cutout, and then this plate is then screwed into the fuselage onto the bearers, which you can see here. That's really quite handy, because it means that if I need to take the engine out to do any work on it, I don't have to fiddle about unbolting physically the engine from the plate. I simply unscrew the plate and the whole thing comes out in one go. It also lends itself to changing engines if you ever have to do that and you just make a new plate for it. Obviously it needs cutting out, and when it comes to doing that, there's a little bit of measuring involved. I'll show you the plan, and I think you can see there's quite a substantial side thrust. Now I have another one of these models which I bought second hand, and I was quite shocked at the degree of side thrust on it. But it works and it doesn't seem to be causing any problems, so I'm going to stick with the design and build in that side thrust as well. Along with this engine, because this was brand new old in the box, shall we say, came this. Now, if you haven't got a mountain board like this with all the dimensions on it, you've got a lot more measuring to do. So with that in mind, if anybody's sitting at home with an OS engine and they're at this similar stage, if I hold that there, you can pause it and you can get all the dimensions that you need to make an accurate mount or bearers for your engine. So we'll just pause it there a second. Right, I hope that's useful. So this is invaluable. You've got a couple of little tabs that fit inside the bearer's position. The drill holes, which are shown as 3.7mm. I'm going to use that in conjunction with the plan and this plate to get the engine bolted on first. Let's move on a little. Let's mark the centre line out first. I've extended the centre line onto the drawing. I don't know how well that'll show up. So that's the centre line scribed on. You can just about see that. I can see it much better with the naked eye, of course. Put this plate on. Actually, I'm going to extend the front of the fuselage. There we go, that's lined up. I can mark on the holes. And actually should have lifted these tabs up a little. Fold them outwards. They mark the inside line of the bearers. That should be the alignment. It doesn't show up very well at all, unfortunately, but I can see it. So I'll carry on with this and then we'll cut it out. That job's done now. The plate's been cut and set in. I've had to open out a little bit of this area here for, I think it's the gearing mechanism. I've also removed the silencer for now, and I've also removed the choke lever because I'm going to have to do some alterations to this cowling, and I think it's always best to do one thing at a time. So there's going to be an issue with the exhaust, there's going to be an issue with the choke lever, and I think there's going to be an issue with the valve rods on this area here. So one thing at a time. Let's try it on. And I hope you can see there, it's fouling the valve gear at the front. So this needs to be let out a little bit. There's no way around it, it has to be done. And I'll mark that off, ease it out, and then we'll take it from there. This is the area I've cut out here on the front, and that's resolved that issue. I'm quite happy with that. I don't think that looks really massively out of place. The prototype had a cutout, or at least one of the prototypes I saw had a cutout here, and I think I'll get lots of air in around the cover, the valve cover, and in through here and through here, so I'm quite happy with that. So that's one issue done. The next one to tackle, or the next couple to tackle, are going to be the lever for the choke and the silencer. And for that, the cowl has to come back off again. This next stage can seem rather daunting. I need to cut out from this access so that it can be easily placed on without fouling the exhaust, and the lever for the choke on the other side. And what I'm aiming to do is have an extension pipe running along the side of the fuselage, although, as I've already mentioned, on the wrong side of the model, but it will give a more scale-like appearance. And as I have said, I have a one of these models already that I purchased ready built, and the chap had actually not quite like this, but he has a Sato, he had a Sato engine buried underneath and an extension pipe running along, and it has a glorious sound to it. It sounds very much like an old vintage motorbike, and I would like to reproduce that effect with this model. So I need to cut this out to allow for the pipe, and also cut out a slot for the choke wire. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to use paper templates like this, and I'll mark on, I'll tape these on so they're in position, and I'll mark on the cutout required. Actually, I'll move that up a little higher. Actually, that's as high as I can go because of the pressure feed pipe. A word about that, actually. I've positioned the pressure feed pipe on the inside so that the tubing coming from the tank can go directly onto it, and you won't see any silicone tubing sticking out of the model, which is a cool thing to do. So I'm going to cut this out. It can be rough. There may be a couple of attempts at doing this before I actually move on to cut anything out of the cowl. So I'm simply hacking that out. So that would give me clearance there. Then I need to put another piece on. Notice there's no measuring going on here at all. It's all using the natural flow of the card, which behaves in a similar manner, to the thin plastic. And if I get it right the first time, it's a miracle. I'm not too worried about getting it perfect. I just want to get an approximation. Now, I don't think that's too far off. It's a little bit too wide, but it is plastic, and that exhaust will get hot. So I have to allow for that. Taking too much off on that side, so I'll create that with the tape. I think that isn't too far away from what I want to achieve. A little bit more needs to come off there and there. Yeah. Lift the whole thing off as one now. Trim it. Does it go over? I think it does. Now, a cutout that looked something like that I think I could live with. So what I'll do is I'll use this as a template on a fresh piece of card, get a neater one, cut it out, see if it still works. If it does, I'll transfer it to the cowl and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Just pause for a moment. I think that's close enough now. What I need to do now is to remove the engine plate, and that's a big advantage of this setup. Just remove the engine plate, put the cowl on, and then fold these back into position to mark onto the cowling. So there's one here and one on the other side. You'll have to take my word for it. I'll take that engine out, put the cowl on, transfer the shape. Here goes. So obviously careful not to move this. Once again, I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera, but rest assured I can see it. That's that one. Flick it over to do the other side. Now it's a case of carefully cutting this out, which I think you can just about see there, and then we're ready to try it again. There we have it then, that's the cutout done. I'm going to take actually a little bit more off here because this is only plastic when all's said and done, and this exhaust will get hot. So I'm going to take more out there. I perhaps could have left some more on here, but then again, as I've just said, this is going to get hot, this pipe, so a little bit of air around there is not a bad thing. But there you go. I hope that demonstrates the way I would do it anyway. I hope it's a less tears approach to cutting a cowl out. I'll tidy this up. There needs to be some work on it, panels and rivets and things like that I've spotted on some photographs, and I think that'll add a lot of character to this feature, and it will be a centre of attention in the same way that the tank up here draws your eye to it. I think it needs a little bit more detail adding. Exhaust to come down here and along the bottom. Do I have it? Yeah, this is the pipe work. So that's going to fit along the side, and I'll have to make some brackets to accommodate that. But there you go. If you've enjoyed this little jaunt into a little bit of fiddling about, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see how it progresses, please subscribe and press that bell icon. Take care now. Have fun.